Hello, friends and beautiful people. It is Catherine Massell, Elevated Consciousness Coach and 5D Visionary. It's been a minute since I've talked to you live, and let's see if we can keep a live broadcast today. It's been challenging today because we've had 3 days of storms here, and it's pretty intense. The power keeps going in and out. So, not really able to go live consistently. I've had to cancel some client appointments today, kind of a bummer. So let's see who's here live. If you're here, you're joining, say hello. Let me know you're here. Today we're going to talk about who are you in time, and you may be asking, what the heck does that mean? Who are you in time? And how is it that your identity becomes locked into time? Who you think you are is really just a snapshot of you. It's just part of the story. You are a multidimensional, multi-leveled, multi-awareness being. It just so happens that your focal point of your awareness, the locus point, the center of your attention, happens to be mostly funding this 3D timeline reality at the moment. And it's all about at the moment, because everything is now. Everything is now. And for what your soul's journey is, and for what your soul wants to experience, you have decided to fund most of your attention, your awareness, your focus, your energy in this 3D timeline. Isn't that fascinating? Especially for those of you that are saying, this is tough, this is intense, I don't know who I am, I don't know what's going on. Well, what if we reframe it this way? That what feels like a challenge right now with these intense and ever amplifying energies, it's just catalyzing the reveal of deeper layers of who you are. And anytime that happens, when we have an opportunity to glimpse the fullness of who we are, the universe and its love for us, and its constant co-creative, helpful endeavors to help us see what's holding us back from who we truly are, just as we are seeing these layers and levels revealed that tell more of the spiritual truth about who we are, right alongside that, the universe is going to show you everything that's keeping you from that. Okay, so alongside you glimpsing, seeing, having aha moments, revelations, and intense awareness of who you are in the light of your spiritual truth, meaning who you are as an infinite, divine, eternal being that goes on and on and on, lifetime after lifetime, experiencing things in timeline after timeline, right alongside that, you're going to see what is keeping you from being in the fullness of that. Because that's what your soul's journey is about. And your soul is deciding from a higher vantage point of view, the perspective that gives you the most benefit at the moment. So you're going to see all the trauma, the drama, the fear, the survival state thinking and behaving. It's going to allow you to be reminded of exactly what is keeping you from the fullness of life, from the fullness of your most divine expression of self. I call it your master timeline. And you're going to see, in light of these very intense, ever amplifying, accelerating energies that are now bringing a close to what we think of in physical time as the calendar year of 2021, you're going to see a lot of your stories about yourself wrapped up from this year. It's a phenomenon called compressing of timelines. And as we are receiving higher light codes on this planet, what it's doing is it's pushing the needle forward on the Ascension timeline, or the elevated consciousness timeline for this planet. Whenever that happens, it changes our relationship to time. So we have two ways of experiencing time. We experience physical time, and we document it through clock time, through the calendar, right? Through marking off the revolution of the sun around the earth, marking off a day, a year, etc., right? And we have that experience of time. We also have a psychological experience of time. And this is felt or sensed time, okay? And this is the time aspect that is giving you a sense of identity, meaning it is marking memories, because essentially who you think you are in 3D time is the product of a bunch of different memories of you. Okay, not all of them are accurate. We talk about this quite a bit in my Timelines Expanded Masterclass. So who you are in time is a felt, it's a sensed experience of time, psychological time. This is how you are measuring or meting out who you think you are. Because who you think you are is blocked off or sectioned off through moments in time. A memory of a day you had, a memory of a certain period of your life, which might have been a decade or a couple decades or a week. Our painful experiences that we mark in time, our joyous experiences that we mark in time. This is all giving a sense of who we think we are. But it's not all accurate, okay? And the reason it's not accurate is because our emotions, meaning the way we respond to life's events, situations, challenges, issues, scenarios, joyous events, not so joyous events, we have a feeling about it. We have a sense about it, okay? And anything we're judging from a sensory level with our 5 senses, sight, taste, touch, smell, and hearing, is not always fully accurate because it's a lot of the time based on a reactionary state. And a reactionary state is otherwise known as a survival mode mindset or state. And any memory that comes from a reaction that gets a rise out of us at that level and stimulates the nervous system to a certain degree and a free radical cascade response in the body can't fully be trusted. Because we're not fully present in that moment. We're just reacting on a physical level. We're not able to sort through the Rolodex of our emotions in that experience and be reasonable or rational about it. And when you think about it, some of the most triggering moments in our life that allow us to have a memory of who we are based off of those kind of reactions, right? Even the super joyous ones. When you think back on maybe even a time where you were completely enamored, or you had a crush on someone, or you were infatuated with someone, how you even felt in those moments, it's not an accurate picture of reality, was it? Especially if we've had those relationships come to pass and they, in hindsight, weren't so great. And maybe we were reacting from a place that wasn't really where we were holding all the cards of reason or being able to see reality truly and correctly, right? So heightened emotions will do this to us. And let's be honest, a lot of how we frame our identity and how we define ourselves have been through those highly triggering, emotional, reactive moments in our life. And there's another thing true about moments that give us snapshots of our identity, and we think, well, I am this person, this happened to me, and this is how I responded, this is how I respond to certain things like this. We start to tell a story to ourselves and about ourselves. It's not always true, because we do have something on this planet called false timelines. We have a false ascension matrix. We have a false matrix of reality that kind of siphons off our energy towards a hologram, everything in 3D, I believe, and everything I teach about is about a hologram or a simulation of reality that's not entirely accurate. The 3D depiction of reality can't always be trusted. But there's also a manipulation in the time fields caused by the false ascension matrix. And the false ascension matrix looks like the true organic ascension matrix that is aligned with your organic time grid and grids. And organic ascension meaning unadulterated, beautiful, stepped up, elevated levels of consciousness that lead us into an ascended state of being, or ascended states of being, because there's no arriving at one place. We keep ascending, we keep evolving. So the false ascension matrix looks like that, seems like that, smells like that, tastes like that, sounds like that. And it's built to function the same way, but it actually siphons off our energy towards a finite energy matrix or grid of energy that is funded by lower frequency emotions, okay? Like lack. Lack is a false ascension matrix construct. It doesn't exist anywhere except in this 3D simulation of reality. Lack is not a construct that you will find past fourth dimensional reality. It is not an energy, a frequency, a vibration that is supported by higher dimensional realms beyond 4D. That's how we know that it is impermanent. It's a fixed construct that is relegated to lower vibrational realms that hold density, hold our emotions in density, and thereby hold us in density. And a lot of maybe your memories about yourself might have to do with lack, might have to do with a scarcity, poverty mindset. These are not accurate. These are false projections in a hologram and a simulated matrix of being that is not a true organic portrayal of reality. Okay? And we can become locked into time, okay, particularly 3D time in this time-space matrix, by continuing to have beliefs about ourselves that are funded by an energy of lack. I hope I'm explaining this well, okay? If I'm not, please ask me questions. Andre is here, Jante is here. Hello, 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 hello. Is this making sense so far? So stay with me here. So your emotions, and a lot of them have to do with a response to this false construct of lack, poverty consciousness, survival mode mentality. Your emotions that are really reactions to that keep you locked down in time. And they create a dense, inaccurate portrayal and identity or definition of self that is not true. It's a false projection of who you are. So if you're seeking to reinvent yourself, if you're seeking to create a higher destiny for yourself, move into a higher expression of who you are, to reinvent yourself as a result of this clearing and releasing of these old patterns of you reacting, not responding, reacting to lack as something that's real, your identity then is tethered to that level of density. And so to reinvent yourself truly and to see yourself finally in the light of your spiritual truth is to unlock yourself in time and make these changes, these reinventions, these transformations, these transmutations of old energy, paradigms, structures, etc., that you are tethered to in your belief system, your ideas and thought forms you have about yourself. The only way to do that accurately and fully is to do so out of time. Okay? So in other words, to become a new and improved version of you, you can only achieve this outcome without the bias of you in the past. Okay? And the bias of you in the past is based on a lack paradigm, a lack structure that is, again, say it with me now, a completely false construct. It doesn't exist beyond 3D and 4D because it's not real. And we're here to play with the realms of 3D and 4D as a big playground of contrast, a big playground of duality. And now here's the interesting part. Your higher self, your God self, that highest expression of you knows what you're playing with. It knows that you're playing with duality, polarity, and contrast here. It knows you are having this experience because it was your soul that decided to embark on this journey of playing on this big playground that we call planet Earth to come and experience contrast. And it is through the sussing out and then recognition of these lower emotions that keep locking you into time, it is up to you to say the duality game stops here. Exploring endless contrast about who I think I am, which isn't really real, but I keep playing with this is me, this idea that this is me, tethered to lack, tethered to poverty, tethered to survival state living. It is only through that contrast of playing with those lower emotions that you get to move into your sovereign self, your God self aspect, and say, I'm done with that. I decide to unhook from those timelines that keep me tethered to an old identity, an old paradigm, an old belief system about who I think I am that was never accurate. It was never a real portrayal of who I truly am. So, in other words, to become a new and improved version of you, you can only achieve this outcome that I'm talking about of moving into your higher destiny. I call it your master timeline, is to do so out of time, to opt out of and unhook from that bias of you in the past. Hi, G. Oh, thank you, Jante. So if you recognize or identify yourself now, how do you think about yourself right now? Chances are many of you who are watching are thinking about yourself as someone who doesn't have X, someone who does not yet have Y, someone who is striving for, asking for, praying for Z. So you are identifying yourself and defining yourself through a lens of lack. You are literally defining yourself through a completely false construct, an impermanent construct that is fixed to 3D reality only, while at the same time, talking out of the other side of your face, you're saying, I want ascension. I want to elevate my consciousness, okay? Because there's a part of you that's saying, here's higher consciousness over here, here's all those goodies attached to ascension and climbing up the ladder of elevated consciousness, but I'm over here. The problem is you're still seeing yourself as separate from it, in other words, lacking it. You are never not who you are. You just have a felt sense that you are not that you are not an elevated being, that you are not divine incarnate currently masquerading in a human suit. Okay? This totally links with what Jessica sent me this morning. Symmetry. Gotta love it. That means your soul is asking, Tulia, to be reminded of this. It's not that you don't know it. And here's the thing, you guys. Not one of you here listening to this, watching this, on a soul level doesn't know exactly what I'm talking about. You do. So it's not about learning this stuff. It's about remembering it. So from my higher self, my God self, to your God self, I'm reminding your human of this stuff. It's going to cause a trigger response in the body that is quite different than the cortisol fight or flight response that we're so used to. It might feel like that at first, but actually it's a different kind of excitement. Like everything that makes up the subatomic particles of you are revving at a super high, fast, elevated vibrational state because you're like, I'm remembering. It's a different kind of response in the nervous system. It's a good one. But it just might feel like that fight or flight at first, but not when you really sit and examine with it, okay? So if you recognize or identify yourself as someone who is locked into a moment or event in time, and a lot of us are reliving trauma, re-traumatizing ourselves over and over again based on a moment in time that was particularly challenging, where we decide in that moment to abandon ourselves, to betray our higher self, to betray our higher God self, sovereign self perspective in favor of being an ego, where we can stay hurt and we can continue to identify ourselves as someone who is hurting, someone who is in pain, someone who needs healing. So we stay locked in time in this perception of self as someone who is always healing, someone who is always manifesting, but not anyone who is healed or has manifested. Correct? And there's the problem. So you're experiencing a very limited expression of you that is contracted and fragmented by time. And what this does is it keeps you in a consciousness loop. So here we are plodding along in our 3D Earth reality, and we actually think of time as a linear continuum, right? A straight line. But that's not accurate, okay? The emotions that keep us locked in time, meaning every moment it's like an opportunity to re-traumatize ourselves, to keep re-identifying with someone who hurts, with someone who has others hurt us, with someone who responds to the world from a place of pain, anguish, depression. It's like we're constantly finding moments in time as we go on moment to moment. And all time is a stringing together of now moments. And we tend to string together now moments to form a bigger story or identity based on what we felt the moment before. This is a natural progression that we've become conditioned to that makes us think that linear time is real. It's actually a closed loop. And it's a closed loop based on the emotional resonance that we keep going into and out of and keep opting in, keep hooking into. It actually keeps us in a consciousness loop. And it's more accurate to think of 3D time as a circle, a closed loop based on an emotional resonance rather than a continuum, stringing forth moments in a straight line. So you keep exploring this very limited, very contracted expression of you in this consciousness loop, and it's relegated to a set of repeating experiences, repeating situations, repeating interactions with people that are confined to a narrow spectrum of emotions, because only through your habituation and conditioning are you comfortable with that particular bandwidth of emotion. And you're comfortable with that particular bandwidth of emotion is because that's where you're saying, this is who I am. My identity is here. It's relegated to this particular conscious loop of emotions. Because simply what you keep telling yourself you are is based on an emotional response or reaction. And you are opting into that continued loop because it's familiar. And anything that we're habituated or conditioned to as familiar becomes our identity. And so if you're living at the mercy of your emotional body, meaning you're responding to this identity of you, reacting to this identity of you all the time, you are locking yourself into this moment of time. So it doesn't matter if this trauma or this moment where you decided to self-negate, this moment where you decided to self-abandon and stay in this very narrow bandwidth of emotions, doesn't matter if this trigger event happened yesterday or 20 years ago. And trauma is not always some knockdown, drag out, abusive thing. Trauma is anywhere where we decide to fragment from who we truly are in our divinity. And this could be anything. But usually, and about 99.99999% of the time, it really stems from us making a decision that we are somehow lesser than, that we are somehow not worthy. That somewhere in our humanness, we're broke and we need to be fixed. When we rely on comparison, this person has everything in their life, they're really put together, and here I am over here. Separation. When we keep choosing separation, we keep re-traumatizing ourselves. And that can be done in any number of ways. Okay? So, staying in this consciousness loop that is relegated to a repeating set of experiences, situations, interactions with people that are confined to a very narrow spectrum of emotion, that's where you are locking yourself in time. And it's when you drop anchor into an emotion that you lock yourself into a level of reality that can only and ever give you feedback about yourself and who you are at that level of reality. So if you keep re-traumatizing yourself, meaning thinking that you're the same person that you were when X, Y, or Z happened to you, and you keep giving yourself that same feedback on an ongoing loop of who you think you are, and it doesn't feel very good. It's a very narrow spectrum of emotions. You're saying, that's me. You're dropping anchor in time, in other words, and you're creating a consciousness loop for yourself. And this is really interesting because this is something that really only exists in 3D. It exists a little bit in 4D, but it's really unique to this time-space structure of 3D. So if you're living at the mercy of your emotional body, you're also living at the mercy of all the stored feelings of past occurrences, falsely informing you of who you think you are. But it's a false projection. It's not real. But you're responding to it as if it is, and that's all that matters. And just like you have a fantasy version of you, that at this point in time, you're not very habituated to responding to that version of you, as well as you are suited to responding to the lower emotional resonance of you, you could make that your reality. You've made it your reality to respond to the lower spectrum version of you, the lower resonance of you. And how have you done it? Habit, conditioning. You've allowed it to become familiar. Just as you've done that, and you decided to play with that contrast, you can play with a whole different level of response. It's the same level of response, really, but you're playing with it in a different reality realm. In your God self perspective, when you're fantasizing about your ideal expression of you, your ideal life, possessing a skill set that you would like to have, an amount of money that enhances your life and nourishes you going forward to complete all of your goals and to have a certain level of success, whatever that is for you. When you daydream or fantasize about it, if you were to make that response in your body as real as you make your response in the body to all your traumatizing, to all of your lower frequency vibrations and emotions that you have, then your body will make that real. Because it's ultimately our body that carries us forth through time, and it's responding to this 3D time-space matrix. Our body is that physical representation that carries us through time. We have this body that signifies or symbolizes to us an idea of moving forward or moving backward. Without a body, you wouldn't really be able to have those points of reference, right? So it's also the body that holds you in time, and your body is responding to you in time, always and ever. So if you're training your body to respond to your lower frequency impulses and emotions, then that's what your reality is going to be. If you're training your body to respond to the higher frequency emotions about who you desire to be, what you fantasize about, what you're making real in your mind, if it becomes real in your body, then your body reacts to, oh, we're just doing this now. And it becomes the frequency vessel, in other words, the container that holds the vibration of you and attracts all those things that are part of that higher destiny version of you, okay? So when you're constantly referring back to a past version of you, in the pain, in the trauma, in the lack, you are in the place of feeling it now. It is your now. So the problem is you have these past identifications of self that moment to moment you are deciding to keep dragging it into the present and making it your now. And so the body is responding in kind. And the body meaning the mind and the body. So the neural connections, the nervous system response is all responding to what you are acting as your now. How are you acting as if it's your now? Feeling those like fuck my life moments or God this again or whatever. The body is just going to react to what's familiar. And it has the same kind of responses in the body that says this is your reality. You drop anchor in time based on your feelings. And if you are feeling things that still are responding to whatever traumatized you 10 minutes ago, 10 years ago, then that is your now. And you are dropping anchor. And that's why it's a consciousness loop instead of a linear time. A linear time would be a continuum and an opportunity to opt into the next best available emotion. But you're not doing that. If you're responding to who you are based on an idea of who you were that you formed from an event in time where you made a decision that you were lesser than, that you were incapable, you didn't trust yourself, you didn't trust the world, you didn't feel safe in the world, and therefore you didn't feel safe. So you made a decision to negate a part of yourself, to fragment from self, to separate from God. In other words, your God self, or your highest divine expression of you. Does this make sense? So every time you go into those habituated responses, reactions to life, I am lacking. Everything I want is over here, but I'm over here. You are constantly reinforcing in your now, which is the place where all creation takes place, is in the now. You don't create in the past. You don't create in the future. Those are just constructs from the vantage point of where you are standing now. Do you have any vision of the past other than how you are looking at it right now? No. Do you have any vision of the future? Any idea about the future? Can you even conceptualize what the future is anywhere else from where you are than from where you are right now? No. Everything is now. All creation takes place now. So you are creating your reality by thinking about yourself as somehow locked in time, and you keep dragging that into your present, and you're creating now from a diminished sense of self, a discounted, separated sense of self based on a false construct of lack or lesser than, unworthiness, undeservingness, whatever you want to call it. None of these are accurate projections or portrayals of who you truly are in the light of your spiritual truth, which is this. You are divine. You are eternal. You go on. There is no permanence to this 3D plane. Nothing is permanent about it except you. Everything else, by the design and the nature and the build of the 3D time space, everything here is temporary and fixed to this 3D time space and the definition of it here. And it is illusory by nature. It is impermanent by nature. Everything in 3D, except you. Except humans. We may shed our mortal coil here, but you go on. That is your higher spiritual truth. So what we've come here to play with is where we keep dropping anchor in time and creating this definition of self that is so far removed from who we truly are in the light of our spiritual truth, which I've just illuminated for you. And so this way of defining yourself through a lens of lack, it stays your now. It stays your now. Until you wake up and realize, hey, I don't have to choose this anymore. I choose to code my frequency at a new and higher vibration. Something that aligns with the new earth. And what we know about the new earth and what I talk about in here all the time, what I talk about every single program that I'm teaching at the moment, is the new earth timeline is here. We just haven't fully anchored it yet. And that's because we're still playing with this duality, polarity, and contrast that we are lesser than. That we are not divine humans currently masquerading in a human suit. That we are not divine, infinite, eternal beings that go on and will outlive this temporary, finite reality realm. So you can change your personal time matrix, meaning who you are based on how you drop anchor in time. Are you dropping anchor in time and creating a consciousness loop that feeds off of itself based on lower frequency emotions that you keep feeling about yourself, lower frequency thought forms that you keep thinking and believing about yourself? Or are you actually on a continuum, better said, stepping the ladder up to the next best available vibration, emotion, feeling all the time? Because that's your destiny. So when you think about ascension, and those of you who are asking to ascend and move into elevated consciousness, do you think that's fixed? Do you think ascension is a place that you arrive at? It's not. If the nature of you and the nature of the cosmos is to be ever evolving infinite, eternal, it goes on. What about that is fixed? What about that is set? What about that has a boundary? What about that has a limit? Ascension is a stepped up level of consciousness that keeps growing, it keeps evolving, it keeps moving. There's nothing static or fixed about it. Everything about the universe and you in it is about not being static. It's about movement. It's about fluidity. It's about flow. So you don't arrive at some ascension point. You don't like just poof, I cleared up all my shadow and here I am in 5D. I'm staying here. It doesn't work that way. Okay? So when you change your own personal time matrix, you do that for a couple of reasons. You do that so you can unhook from your old way of being that is just conditioning, it's just habituation, it's just what's familiar to you. It's just you dropping anchor in time, so you're creating a repeat consciousness loop for yourself, and you stay there in this very narrow bandwidth of emotions. Okay? So choosing a different and higher time matrix means you opt out of that, you unhook from that. But it also means that you're making that agreement in your body to keep evolving, keep moving, and keep understanding who you are through different dimensional lenses of time. So there's a version of you in 4D. Actually, there's many versions of you in 4D. There's a version of you in 5D. There's a timeline that you are exploring and having some fun with right now in 6D, 7D, 8D, 9D, 10D, and on and on and on and on and on. Through infinite dimensions, levels, layers, realities, and timelines. But your focus, the bulk of your attention, is fixed on your 3D point or locus of attention, center point of attention right here, right now. Listening to me. Babble on again about time and timelines, okay? So when you change your personal time matrix, you can unhook from your old way of being and be in alignment with the universal energy matrix. So when you're making higher and better decisions about who you are in the light of the spiritual truth, that you are eternal, that you are infinite, that you are having a multitude of different experiences throughout timelines, dimensions, spaces, realities right now, you're doing all of this. You are a busy bee. When you make that decision about yourself, you're going to start aligning with realities that match that. And you're starting to hold a different vibration in your body that matches the universal energy matrix. This also controls the universal time matrix, which is aligned with organic ascension, not false ascension. False ascension, lack, survival mode. Organic ascension, evolution. Infinite up levels, upgrades. Incremental upgrades into higher levels of being and experiences over time. A linear continuum that allows you to keep stepping up the ladder into higher levels of emotions, feeling states. This is always going to be aligned with true organic ascension. So here's something else to consider. When you are presented with circumstances, situations, or engagement with certain kinds of people that seem to be on repeat, okay? So if you're literally saying, God, this person again, or this situation again, like, why do I keep manifesting this? Why does this keep happening? Well, hopefully after what I've talked about right now, or have a better sense of that. So if that's on repeat, if you keep choosing to respond in the same way every time to those triggering situations, events, scenarios, those triggering people, okay? If you choose to respond in the same way every time, you are locking yourself into the same vibration, the same consciousness loop, the same time matrix, and an agonizingly familiar consciousness loop. But if you take yourself out of time in those moments, and anytime we do that, it's like we refuse from our God self, meaning the sovereign aspect of us that acts from our true divine free will. In those moments of frustration, in those moments of being triggered, if we remove ourselves from time, meaning We take a beat. We take a deep breath in. We call all our energy present. We call ourselves to attention in presence, in now moment awareness. And we say, I choose differently. I'm going to respond differently to this person. What you are doing is you've stopped dropping anchor in time. By choosing to respond differently, you are choosing a higher timeline. Hopefully you're not, choosing something lower, like to punch somebody in the face, right? Although there are those moments. Even the most spiritual of us want to slap somebody in the face sometimes, okay? It's true. But even taking yourself out of time in that moment it's to say, it's not that hard, you guys. Taking yourself out of time is actually quite easy. It's just that we're not habituated to it. We haven't made it a habit yet. We can. Anything we practice can become a habit. So practice seeing how you would normally respond in that situation. And you'll know it because it'll be the first thing that pops up in your mind. It'll be a muscle memory. It'll be something in the body that's held as, this is how I respond because this is who I am, okay? But if you stop that process, and it's just a cascade that happens very quickly and often without our conscious awareness. So you have to get conscious. You have to get present. You have to say, I can choose to respond differently. I decide to respond differently. Then what happens? You stop dropping anchor in that very narrow bandwidth of emotions that's defining your consciousness loop. And you move up that linear continuum. You move a little bit further up that spectrum, that bandwidth of emotions. You choose from your God self the next best available vibration. Oh! Now you are no longer defining yourself, locking yourself to a moment in time. Does this make sense? So after a very quick check-in with your God self, you decide to choose differently, you decide to choose higher. And the best way to do this, and this is what I tell all of my clients, whether they're in the In Alignment and Thriving Core program, whether they're in my Timelines Expanded Masterclass, what is the God choice? The God choice in that moment, what is it? That which is aligned with my highest and best good, aligned with the highest and best good of all, and with the least amount of resistance for all involved. What if you made a choice or a decision based on that? That is definitely 100% guaranteed, I promise you, is going to take you up into the next best available vibration. And that's what it's all about, kids. You don't have to take a huge quantum leap from being angry to being totally elated and like, I'm on top of the world. And let's face it, we don't work that way. We don't go from 0 to 100 with our emotions that way. Make it easy on yourself. What's the next best available vibration? How about gratitude? That always works for me, and it works for you too. I'm glad I'm presented with this opportunity right now, because this is exactly what I've been asking the universe to help me see, that I have the power to choose higher. Thank you, universe. And then make that choice, make that God choice. What's the best way to respond in that moment? That is in alignment with the highest and best good for you, the highest and best good for that person or all involved. It involves the least amount of resistance for all involved. And here's a little secret about what the least amount of resistance for all involved is. Love. Love is the answer to the least amount of resistance for all involved. What's aligned with love? Maybe you don't want to tell that person, I love you, and give them a big kiss on the lips. But what would it look like if you opted for kindness? What would it look like if you decided in that moment to forgive that person because they're in pain? What would it look like for you in that moment to have mercy and compassion and be a compassionate witness to that person's pain that they're reacting from? And it takes very little. It takes very little to do this. Every single person on this planet has the ability to respond in that way. Okay? So after this quick check-in with your God self and you decide to choose differently from a place of inner wisdom, you let your inner sage, your inner sovereign self, your God self, whatever you want to call it, hand the situation over to that perspective of you, What you are doing then is you're allowing timelessness, the eternal now, the zero time, to take hold. This is spiritual time, and it's a different felt sense of psychological time. And you allow it to move through you. You allow then in that moment when you choose higher, to allow the universal energy matrix that is aligned with love and ascension and elevated consciousness, you allow that to move through you. You allow that to be something that flows, and you allow yourself to be the vessel to hold that. You upgrade your connection to God, Self, and Source in that moment. And guess what this does? It changes your DNA. It changes your cellular coding, meaning it literally allows you to code higher for abundance. And everything that is aligned with choosing out of love is aligned with abundance, prosperity, moving forward, elevating your awareness, your consciousness, evolving towards the God Self perspective and vantage point of being, which is the only accurate lens for seeing reality for what it is. And you have access to all of that by the choice you're willing to make and the decision that you're going to be present in all those little fuck my life exchanges that make you think that the world is unsafe, the world is untrustworthy, that people are untrustworthy. Because what you're really doing is using those as projections to where you feel unsafe, not trusting, and not loving of yourself. So when you continue to keep choosing differently in alignment with your ideal expression, your God Self expression, the more you get to observe yourself from a higher dimensional vantage point, because you're now dropping anchor in time at a higher emotional state and frequency of you. And here's what happens when you do that. So if you don't know much about different dimensional expressions of time, and if you want to, hello, Timelines Expanded Masterclass. This is not a program like anything else out there, and I'll be teaching it again in January of 2022. It's a 12-module, very comprehensive, spiritually advanced program talking about everything about time and timelines, okay? It's my zone of genius. It's my wheelhouse. It's what I love to talk about and geek out on. So here's something to know. Time speeds up in higher dimensional realms, okay? So if you're dropping anchor with your emotions into your highest and best timeline of you, there is an expression of you in that vantage point that is slightly ahead of the 3D you in time, okay? So as I mentioned briefly a moment ago, there are different expressions of you in different dimensional realms and realities, okay? You're playing with a lot of different timelines at once because you're multidimensional and you are multi-level awareness, currently having a focal point of attention as Tulia, as Jante, as Jill, as Andrea, okay, as Katrina. This is just an individuated consciousness perspective of you, but this is consciousness acting through the vessel of Katrina, Catherine, Julia, Tulia, Jill, Andrea, Jante, okay? And just as we have this, which is the focal point of our attention here in the third dimension reality, there's a 60 expression of you, there is a 70 expression of you. Actually, there's many, because we have many hubs of consciousness within each dimensional reality, okay? But when you are thinking of Tulia in a fifth dimensional expression, okay, your relationship that you're having with time, and it is a relationship, your consciousness is having a relationship with time in this dimensional realm. You have a consciousness relationship with time in 5D, 6D, and beyond. And the way we would look at it from our 3D state looks like a very fast, accelerated expression of time. We would see it from our 3D selves as a really fast moving expression of self. Like super quick snapshots of time. And in fact, our 3D minds couldn't even fully conceptualize it, okay? So if you are choosing, and you stay with me here now, we're going to go down the rabbit hole a little bit. If you keep making choices then and dropping anchor in time from the God self version of you, let's just say for the sake of argument, that's a 5D version of you, okay? If you keep choosing to respond to life from a sense of love, from a sense of mercy, compassion, kindness, to all the events, situations, and scenarios and people in your life, then you are responding to life from a higher vantage point, a higher expression of you. This is going to speed up your sense of time. Does this make sense? So this is a vantage point of you that is slightly ahead of the 3D you in time. And this is where it gets really fun to play with this. Because when you are in this vantage point, meaning you're just deciding to funnel your energy, your attention, your vibration, your frequency into this higher vantage point, this higher expression of you that exists in 5D. And if you're doing work there, I call it play, of changing different potentials in the time fields, it takes longer to arrive in 3D. So this is why you get to play with things like bending time. You don't bend time when you are in your ego vantage point of self. It doesn't work that way. You must choose to go into your God self vantage point. You must choose to go into a higher vantage point and expression of you. And this vantage point or expression of you becomes more real if you are more practiced with it. And how do you become more practiced with everything? It is something you do every day. So deciding then to respond to life from a higher vantage point of view every day will put you more and more in a place where you are habituated to acting from, living from, behaving from your God self vantage point and perspective on reality. And in this place, it opens up all kinds of 5D technology because you're aligned with that dimensional expression of you. So you're going to align with then everything that's part of that dimensional reality. Not everything, but more and more. And the more practiced you become, the more that opens up, if that makes sense, right? And one of the things that we need to understand if we are going to anchor into these higher dimensional expressions of self is that there are technologies there that open up when we are frequency match to align with them. Like playing with time. Time is a different expression in 5D, is a different expression and level of awareness in 60, 70, and beyond. And in fact, as we go higher up in the dimensions, the space between events collapses because time is so accelerated. We go into this in a lot more detail in the In Alignments program. Like I said, this is spiritually advanced stuff, so stay with me here. But you can take this tool from the 5D vantage point where you can essentially download it, play with it, and then use it to change potentials in your 3D reality. The easiest way to know that and play with it is bending time. And I have 2 videos with it. The other way is to collapse timeline potentials, which I've just introduced, and it's been out for a while, but I created an offer for my Collapsing Timelines micro course today. It goes a little bit deeper down the rabbit hole of what I'm talking about right here with how humans create time in 3D, because we are the keepers of 3D. This is our dimensional realm of play. And we also create and maintain the time field here, okay? So humans create time, we perpetuate it, and we maintain it. We are the keepers, or the time cops, here in 3D. So I talk about that in the Collapsing Timelines micro course, but I also walk you through a very powerful process of collapsing timelines, okay? So when you are working with this higher vantage point of view, you have this ability to manipulate the time fields, okay? We've always had this ability, but this is knowledge that has been shrouded to us for a long time, not anymore, okay? And it's a lot easier to play with time than you think it is. We think as time as inflexible, we think of it as rigid, we think of it as a construct that is unchanging. That is not true at all, okay? It's actually really malleable. It is not fixed. It's very elastic, okay? So when you're in this place of being observing reality in 3D from a higher vantage point of view, you can kind of precognitively view potentials that don't yet exist in 3D and respond from that expanded version of you. So you can merge timeline potentials, you can activate timelines, you can collapse timelines, as I've mentioned, you can work with generational timelines, you can work with planetary collective timelines. There's no limit, really. You can have transdimensional experiences of time where you drift. You have like a transdimensional drifting experience through different timelines, expressions, and dimensional realms. You could really play with all kinds of things, and I take you really, really deep into this into Timeline's Expanded Masterclass. But I want you to understand something. If you take away nothing else from this talk here, even if it seemed like really nebulous and esoteric and out there, let this information sit with you. Call in your God self and ask it to help you have this information land with you in a place where you can retrieve it, where you can work with it. And we can't really intellectualize this stuff. It doesn't work because it's anything that's part of realms that are beyond 3 and 4D. Our intellectual, rational analysis wants to kick in and make sense of it and compartmentalize and categorize it. It doesn't work. It's only going to confuse and confound you even more. So again, it's a call to go into that higher vantage point perspective of you and say, higher self, God self, help me to have this information land with me in a way that it makes sense, that I can receive it, that I can work with it. Okay? Your emotional state and your ability to exercise free will in order to choose differently is what funds a new timeline. Okay? So if you're not liking what's going on in your life right now, you're not living your most desirable, preferable reality, you can opt into funneling and putting your awareness, your focus and attention into a different timeline potential, one that holds more desirable and preferable experiences. You can activate that timeline. Okay? And you can declare from your God sovereign self to choose in accord with your highest and best timeline for being now. And you'll release the energetic funding of contrasting timelines, and where you're playing with contrast in other timelines that are not beneficial or more preferable for you. Okay? And don't support the God choice for you. Okay? This is something that we work on. I teach you how to do in the Timelines Expanded Masterclass. So be consistent with the kind of choices you're making going forward. Where can you take a beat and stop that habituated reactive response that you have to life and all of the triggering situations and people, etc.? Because when you keep doing that, but at the same time you're saying, I want ascension, I want to step up the ladder into elevated levels of consciousness, you're speaking out two sides of your face. And you're sending out a confusing signal or broadcast to the universe. So it's just going to send you more random experiences to play with and more contrast to explore, because that's the energetic deficit, I guess you could say, that you're setting up within you. You're setting up a mixed signal of what you're sending out to the universe. And resist the urge to kind of backtrack to just that conditioning and familiarity. Who you think you are is really just a product of conditioning and habituation and familiarity. It is not an accurate or true portrayal of reality or you in reality. Okay? So resist the urge to backtrack to it just because it's familiar, just because it feels like your comfort zone. And some of us will choose a comfort zone that is not beneficial for us, does not hold more preferable or beneficial ways of being, simply because we're just conditioned to it, right? Resist the urge to keep moving into regret and blame and shame and guilt and all those emotions that are relegated to the lower bandwidth or spectrum of emotions, okay? That's what keeps you tethered to the false ascension matrix, an inorganic universal time grid and energy matrix, a false construct of you based on lack, which, as we've talked about, is not a real construct, and it does not exist beyond our belief systems that are relegated to 3D and 4D. Lack is not an energy supported beyond 4D because it doesn't exist. It has definition and it has resonance in 3D and 4D, and that's it. It's not supported in 5D or beyond. Shame, guilt, blame, and resentment, same way. These are not energetics that are supported by the frequencies of 5D and beyond, okay? So release yourself from regret, from blame, from shame, from guilt, from where you chose poorly in the past, or you perceiving where you chose poorly in the past. They were just choices. You don't have to consider yourself to be the sum total of your choices. They were just choices. But oftentimes how we choose to identify ourselves is as the sum total of our choices and decisions. Not true. Not true. We are who we be. So who do you be in this moment? Who are you right now, in other words? How are you thinking about yourself right now? How are you feeling and believing things about yourself right now? That's all there is. That's all that matters. Okay? Trust and surrender to new circumstances because there's going to be plenty of them. Alternate realities are going to constantly merge and overlap into this 3D reality realm. That is the nature of the Ascension timeline on this planet. Get used to it. Get used to proceeding without certainty. Okay? Get comfortable with it, however you have to do it. Timelines expanded is a great way to do it. Talk to your ego like an old friend, because it is. As you make this transition and making these higher vibration choices and decisions for you. And don't suppress your ego or try to kill it or try to ignore it. What we resist persists. So if you keep telling your ego how much you hate it and how out of line it is and your inner critic to shut up and whatever, it just comes back with that much fuller force, right? And our egos are forces to be reckoned with. But instead of trying to fight it, we can heal that rift and that separation from self that we experience with ego from a place of love. Okay? Tell your ego you'll help it so you can help it evolve with you. That's what your ego really wants to hear, believe it or not. And know that your issues, your challenges, and even people that have helped you create a limited version of you will naturally fall away. So those triggering situations, those triggering events that I talked about and kept hearkening to in this talk, those triggering people, when you keep choosing a higher vibration, it almost renders you vibrationally invisible to those lower frequency emotions, events, scenarios. It doesn't mean they go away completely. It just means that you have more of a neutral response to them going forward. It doesn't have that triggering charge that it used to. Okay? And it's okay to have these situations that have defined you, or even these people that have defined you, to fall away. You will grieve for it because we grieve for lost parts of self, whether they were good for us or bad for us. Either way, we grieve for lost parts of self because we are so wrapped up in our identity of who we think we are. And that's okay. It's natural. Don't get hung up on that. Don't marinate in that. And regularly say, from your God self perspective, I choose to unhook from trauma and drama patterns that keep me in consciousness loops and limit the range of my emotional expression. It's not in alignment with the evolution of who I truly am. And so if you want to explore how to collapse certain timelines where you keep playing with this contrast, you keep playing with this polarity and duality, and keep searching out those events, situations, triggers, people, etc. Perhaps now, as we come to the culmination of this 2021 timeline, of this calendar year, you are glimpsing the fullness of things that need to fall away, things that need to dissolve, things that need to collapse. If you would like a valuable tool to help you collapse those timelines, work with your God self perspective, see how we actually create time and timelines in 3D, see what it means to work from our God self perspective and activate the God choice, and then activate higher potential timelines for ourselves. That's what the Collapsing Timelines micro course is all about. So I will put that as a link in the comments, and you can actually use this as a foundation for seeing maybe timelines expanded is for me. Maybe I would like to go deeper down the rabbit hole with that stuff. Like I said, this is my wheelhouse. This is my zone of genius. Timelines Expanded Masterclass. There really is no other program like this out there because it's extremely comprehensive. I teach it live every year, sometimes twice a year. I'm teaching it live again on January 11th of 2022. It is a 12-module program, so it's a deep dive. It's comprehensive. It's spiritually advanced, and it's for those who really want to understand that you are a constantly evolving, ever-moving being. You're not static. Everything about reality is flexible, including time. In fact, everything about, what we think is really fixed, it's not so fixed at all. It just depends on your perspective and vantage point in being able to look at the thing that you're studying. And when we do this from a higher vantage point and expression and dimensional reality of self, we can change reality. So I hope that this was really exciting for you, and I hope that I blew your mind, because I love to do that. And talking about this, the sun came out, and so I'm going to get out after 3 days of storming. I'm going to try to get outside and enjoy the day. So I hope that this was wonderful for you and enlivened your spirit and inspired you to go on and learn more and to do more. And I'm going to put the link for Collapsing Timelines micro course in here in the comments. Mwah. Love and peace. Bye.